Hey up everyone and welcome back to my channel, and in this video I'm going to be drawing this tabby cat in charcoal. So I've already transferred an outline onto paper and then I'm going to start by applying the white charcoal. If you've seen some of my other charcoal tutorials that I've got on my channel, then you'll know that I always start with white like this. Just anywhere that's got white or any lighter values that are lighter than the actual paper, and I'll just apply white to them areas. When you're applying it, you just pay attention to things like the direction of hair growth and that kind of thing. Don't just do your strokes in random directions, always follow the direction of the hair growth. This cat's got a white coloured bib and then some white around its nose, and also things like highlights in eyes, and then there's some white hairs in ears as well, and then you've got lighter areas in between these stripes and what have you on forehead and that kind of thing. And then I come back in with the black charcoal pencil and I do exactly the same with that, and just apply it to the areas that are either black or the darker than the shade of the paper itself, and you just add it to all them areas, all the stripes, the eyes and pupils and that kind of thing. I don't worry about blending at this stage, I wait until I've got on what I want to get on and then I'll do that afterwards. The charcoal pencils that I'm using are General's charcoal pencils in black, and the white one is also General's charcoal pencil. And then the paper is ClaireFontaine Paint on mixed media paper in Gris colour. And in this video, this picture is A3 size. I'm working in an A3 size pad. This is probably the first time that I've had a cat like this in A3 size, where you can really push that detail a little bit. Normally people that have cats, they have them on a smaller size, so I can't get as much detail in as what I got in this one. So I thought it'd make an ideal tutorial, something other than a dog. I'm using lots of pieces of paper here to rest my hands and fingers and what have you on, because this paper, any kind of toned paper, is really bad for if your skin oils get on it, it just marks it and you can't get it off. And I've tried the gloves, I've got some gloves that I use, but all they do is just transfer charcoal that sticks to them to everywhere else on your piece of paper as well, so they just end up getting really dirty to the gloves as well, so I've just gone back to using sheets of paper. So now I'm just building on the black areas where the black is darker, where it is actually black, so I'll apply a little bit more black to them areas. Some other areas it's either not as black or it's just like little black hairs mixed in, which you know, it's got lots of white hairs and pale hairs mingled in as well, so it's just not as dark in them areas. So I'm just focusing on the darkest areas. And now I'm done with black charcoal for now, and I've come in with a blending stump, and I'm just going to blend all that using this blending stump. I'm going to leave the white areas for now and just blend the black areas. And I'll blend the white areas a bit later because I've got another blending stump that I use for white, so you're not contaminating it too much with black charcoal. You'll see a big transformation whilst I'm doing this stage, because a lot of these areas that are a little bit lighter where I did the black charcoal are going to suddenly look a lot darker as soon as I blend it with this blending stump. And this will create a darker base for me to then come back in with white charcoal and start putting some hair details on top of that, obviously to a later stage. So anyway, I did this drawing right at the beginning of this month, slotted in amongst all my Christmas commissions. This one's not a Christmas commission, the owner just had it done for herself. So I thought I'd get a recording of it and then get it up for Christmas, hopefully. At the time of drawing this, it were a bit of a cat period, because I were doing a painting of 2 cats and I had a couple of other cat drawings going on, so they were just a a little spurt of cats that I don't normally get. It's normally just the odd cat and then nearly all dogs and then maybe an horse every now and again. Right, so now I've blended all that, and I also came in and blended the bits of white as well. And I've done all of that, so I'm coming in now with the black charcoal pencil again, and I'm going to start working on the darkest bits, adding another layer to darkest bits, and also places like nose and eyes and things like that, just refine them and tidying them up a little bit, ready for adding more detail. When you use the blending stump on it, it does tend to lighten a little bit where you've got your darkest areas, so you often do have to come in again and put another layer on to darken it back down again. You can see that my pencil's getting a little bit short now, so I've got it in a pencil extender. I think I need another one though, because more recently my white pencil also got really short, so I'd got a black one and a white one that both needed to be in a pencil extender, but they both need to be in the same end because other end's the wrong size, it's a lot too big, so I think I need to get another one. I don't like a bit of every pencil going to waste every time, so I want to use as much of them as possible. So I'm just continuing to add some darker details, some air texture and things like that, because there's a lot of air texture going on with this cat. Because it's an A3 size, the head on this cat were actually quite big, so I'd got quite a big area to work over and get all these little details in. It does work out better in end because having a larger piece means that you can put more detail in, and it does end up looking better as a result. So I'm back with blending stump, and I'm just going to give that nose a little bit of a blend. I always find cat nose a little bit more awkward, but I think it's because I don't do that many of them compared to dog noses. And then I'm going to use the blending stump on this ear, and I'm just going to add some base for that ear flap to represent the skin that's on the inside of ear flap, which is a little bit darker, and then the white hairs that are on the ear flap in front of it will stand out more. And speaking of the white, I've made a start on that now, just working on the rim of ear and starting to add some details in, like them little hairs that I was talking about. It's quite easy to add white charcoal on top of dark charcoal. If I were working in graphite, this would take absolutely forever. So I get drawings done a lot faster using charcoal. I went through a time when I was doing drawings in graphite and they were taking a lot longer, and it were a lot more difficult to do highlights and what have you. So when I started using charcoal, it were an all different ball game. And this layer is always quite satisfying because you see it really start coming together when you're adding these details on. So I'm just concentrating on mapping the details in at the minute. I'm not using a blending stump out like that. I'm just getting all the hairs in and highlights on eyes and the iris and what have you. Paying a lot of attention to the direction of the hairs growing in, and also the length of the hairs, because it does vary a little depending on whereabout on cat's face you're putting the hairs on. I mean, on the nose and what have you, they're going to be really short, and then on top of head, in front of ears and things like that, they're going to be longer. I'm adding detail on all parts of cat now, whether it's the lighter areas or the darker areas. Even on the lighter areas like that bib, when I went over it with blending stuff before, it just tones down the white a little bit on the charcoal, so when you put more white charcoal strokes on, you can still see them, so you can still have some air texture and it look a little bit more like there's actual fur there rather than just plain white. I try to use the colour of the paper as much as possible to do the shadows on light parts of any subject. So if you've got a subject that's got a lot of white on and there's some shaded areas in that white area, it's never as dark as black, so the colour of the actual paper comes in handy for having the shadows in them lighter areas by just not applying anything to that area at all, so paper's showing through. Hence the term tonal drawing, because you're allowing the paper to do part at work. There's not a major example of it in this piece actually, because of the nature of the fur and what have you. But I will try and show a better example of that in a future video. So as I progress with these white details, you can see the cat lightening up a lot again after I made it really dark with that blending stump after I'd applied them blacks. You can vary how much you lighten it back up again by how concentrated your hairs and strokes and things are on that darker base. So the more you cover that base up, the lighter it'll go again, and then if you don't want it to go too light, then you just be a little bit more sparing with your white strokes on top of that darker base. On a cat's nose, just below where the eyes are, if you draw a line between the bottoms of eyes and the top of the actual nose itself, there's quite an extreme change in direction of the hair on that area, on the Bridget nose. So further down, just above the nose itself, the fur is growing downwards towards nose, and then between eyes further up, the fur's growing upwards towards top of cat's head. So where you've got your inner corners of your cat's eyes, the hair sort of fans outwards, and some of it starts to grow upwards and some of it starts to grow downwards, and this happens on both sides. So in the middle you've got an area where they meet, so there's sort of almost like a little bit of a ridge or a mohican or hair that where it meets up in the middle. It's quite different to the way that the fur on a dog's face works, because even further down muzzle near nose, the fur on a dog doesn't grow down towards the nose, it grows down towards down the sides of the muzzle, so it's going down sideways as opposed to coming straight down towards your nose. And then on top of muzzle it actually does grow upwards away from nose. So yeah, there's a lot of differences between dogs and cats, and because dogs tend to be much more asked for than cats, you do a lot more dogs. So when it comes to doing a cat, they are quite different in a lot of ways, and a lot of people say they struggle getting a cat right compared to a dog. Some go as far as to say that they hate doing cats because they just can't seem to get them right. I must admit, for me it's nice to have a change and to do something a bit different from a dog sometimes. So I'm getting closer to finishing the main part at cat. There's still a little bit of body to one side, and then where there's a bit of leg showing as well that I'll be doing afterwards, and then I'll move on to blanket. But for now I'm just adding a few more white details, and also coming in with black charcoal pencil and adding a few more black details. You can see where I've just mapped in that bit of leg that I was talking about, but I'm just refining them stripes on the forehead where you get that typical M kind of formation. So now I'm onto that leg, and I'm just going through the same motions as I did with Restic Cat. I added a little bit of charcoal originally, and then I went over it with a blending stump to provide a general base. There's not really much white going on this part. You've got some white on paw right at front there, and then the rest of it is just darker tabby. And now I've come back in with black charcoal pencil again in order to do some stripes and what have you, where there's some stripes on leg and that side at body there. Because like before, when you go over it with that blending stump, it just lightens it all, so you need to come back in and push some darks again. And still paying attention to the direction that the fur's growing in when you're applying this. And then I come back in with the white charcoal and start adding some details, and then in between you'll see me just blending that out a little bit with blending stump, and then coming back in again with more white charcoal. And I also start adding in the edges of the blanket that the cat's laying on, that are going to be overlapping that leg and side of that body there as well. Adding that bit of blanket just helped me to define the edge where you can cease to see the leg and paw of the cat, so that I can continue working on leg without worrying about going over that boundary, so to speak. And I'll just finish off the details on this leg and side at body, and then when I've done that I will resume on the blanket, which now I've started doing. Now, blankets and folds in materials and things like that, it's not really within my comfort zone. I'm used to doing everything that's on an animal, like fur and skin and feathers and that kind of thing. So doing blankets and folds and what have you is a little bit different for me. I do tend to like to add a little bit of background with the charcoal portraits. It just seems to set them off nicer, and it's good to have a challenge to do some other textures and what have you for a change. When I'm doing blankets and things like this, I tend to use like a cross hatching technique, and I let the cross hatching, the directions of the strokes go in the direction of the material, if you know what I mean. So if there's like folds in the material, then the lines of the crosshatch will go over as if it's like actual stripes on your material. And that's how I tend to draw the material, to make it look like there's actual folds in it. It seems to be quite an effective technique in charcoal. And obviously I'll add highlights and shadows in relevant areas as well, in order to also get the effect of folds and creases and what have you. I find the cross-hatching technique on things like blankets and floors and other kinds of things, objects in background and what have you, I find it quite satisfying in some way. I don't know whether anybody else watching has ever done cross-hatching, but if you haven't, then it's something I'd recommend, just using that cross-hatching technique to shade some things in and see how it works for you. Like I mentioned before, I can use it to get a sense of like direction and even perspective. You know, with the direction that you do your cross-hatching in, it can just help you to get the correct perception of angles and planes and that kind of thing, if you know what I'm getting at. So it's like with this blanket, some of these strokes are going straight across the blanket and over the humps of the creases and what have you at a right angle to the viewer, and then the other strokes come towards the viewer and they sort of fan out towards the viewer, like, you know, into different directions depending on what direction the blanket is folding in, and it just helps you to get the impression of how that blanket is folding and making it look more 3D, if you know what I mean. So anyway, let me know in comments if you've ever done cross-hatching and what you think of it. I am coming close to finishing this drawing, so I hope you found it helpful. And all I've got to do now is add some whiskers using that white charcoal pencil. And if you've enjoyed what you've seen, please click the like button because it really helps me out. Subscribe if you aren't already to see more videos coming like this. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye!